dodging his grabs and slams which covered most of the arena. Shiro tried her best to buy some time so that she could let her arm recover. However, the giant seemed to be intelligent as he continued to force her to overexert herself so that she worsened her injuries, making it harder to heal. There was the option of flying up, but that only makes it easier for him to try to burn her to a crisp, as well as gaining the option of eating her while she was in midair. Therefore, Shiro stayed on the ground when she could, narrowly dodging another strike. Shiro understood that this couldn't go on since the longer she waited, the more tired she'd become, analyzing his body. She understood that this skin was extremely tough, so she'll need to aim for the orifice on his face. That way, she can attack him from the inside as that was weaker than his skin, but there was the problem that she can't use her bow if her left arm is injured. While she could try to fire it with the help of her leg like what happened against the Minotaur, it would reduce her speed dramatically and allow the giant to kill her in one go. Gritting her teeth, she decided to save spirit nature for later since that was her trump card. If she used it now, it would cause her to fail the main tower. Unless she absolutely needed to, she wasn't going to use her spirit nature, summoning her sword. She threw it towards his arm before pulling herself up if she was on his arm. It removes one of his means of attack and makes it easier for her to buy time. Plus, if he injures himself, it'll be the cherry on top, just as she landed on his arm. A giant shadow loomed over her as he didn't hesitate to try to crush her, dashing forwards towards his biceps. Shiro managed to dodge his attack narrowly, throwing her sword at the arm that he used to attack. She used it as a pivot to swing herself, as the giant lifted his hand. Shiro used this momentum to swing around to his back, grabbing his hair. Shiro narrowed her eyes and summoned her spear, piercing towards the back of his head. Her arm became a little numb when her spear failed to stab through his scale. Hopping off the back of his head, Shiro dodged his attack again. Understanding her current situation, Shiro couldn't help but imagine herself as a tiny fly annoying the hell out of this giant as he was failing to land a single hit on her, with Shiro being able to dodge every attack that he threw at her. The giant glared at her with fury as the flames in his eyes burned brighter, watching him open his mouth. Shiro understood that he wanted to use the breath attack again. Now that she had slightly more time, she quickly swung herself behind him and created her layers of stone walls again. This time, since she wasn't in the center of the breath, she should have an easier time in surviving this unharmed, as the flames enveloped the arena. Her guess was right as it was now much easier to fend off the flames compared to before. However, what she didn't expect was the giant flexing his muscles and shattering her stone walls the moment the fire disappeared. Can you not break my defenses with just the power of muscle contraction? It's rather rude. I know you're probably single since you've been stuck in that portal prison, of sorts, but surely you don't need to impress the pretty sisters outside this barrier now. They're pretty, but the size just doesn't match, you know? You'd kill the poor girls, Shiro said while dashing around the arena, glancing down at the portal which he climbed out of. Shiro could see some chains still attached to him around the waist, narrowing her eyes. Shiro wondered if there was anything she could do with the portal or not since she wanted to make use of every resource that she was given. Maybe I should jump in it, Shiro mused to herself while dodging more of his attacks. They were currently in a situation where neither of them could kill one another as Shiro couldn't harm the giant and the giant couldn't hit Shiro. However, this was exactly the situation that Shiro wanted since it allowed her arm to slowly heal up after around 10 minutes. Most of the muscles were now repaired with the new skin being extremely tender and sensitive to the touch. It was as if it would rip apart and bleed from even the slightest disturbance, furrowing her brows at her skin that was still a little red. Shiro shrugged. While this might be a problem for normal people, it was okay for her since she could ignore the pain, summoning her bow. Shiro was going to begin her counterattack, releasing her pin-up killing intent. The giant's movement paused for a second and Shiro then summoned her spear. The good thing about Ares' spear is that its attack and armor penetration is increased should it be thrown at high velocities. Since she had already fired her sword from her bow before, she should be able to do the same with the spear. There was only the problem of the spear being quite long, notching the spear onto the string. Shiro watched as the spear tip scratched along the ground, forcing a smile. A soft glow radiated from the bow, raising her eyebrow. Shiro watched as the bow morphed into a longbow, which could now house the spear without a problem. Good for me. I suppose for a goddess of the hunt, she'll need a bow that can use all kinds of arrows. If I squint hard enough, a spear is just a massive arrow. Shiro muttered with a shrug, jumping back. She pulled as hard as she could on the bow, exploding with a deep red aura. The spear was raring to go, aiming the spear towards the eye. Shiro let go of the string, asterisk bang, sending the spear flying. Shiro was surprised by the force that it generated since some of the ground besides her had been shattered by the impact. Seeing this, the giant furrowed his brows and raised his hand. Asterisk KRRR. Clashing against the hand, sparks started to fly as the spear was eventually knocked aside. Despite this, however, Shiro had a grin on her face. After all, the spear managed to pierce the giant's hand, and some blood could be seen rolling down his hand, now that she had inflicted an injury on him. No matter how small, she understood that he could be injured and subsequently killed. Resummoning the spear next to her, Shiro fired it once more while making sure not to stay in the same spot. Seeing this, the sisters became excited since things had looked grim before. She wasn't able to injure him at all, while a single fire breath had rendered her arm useless. But now that she had found a way to harm him, it could mean that victory was going to follow suit. As for Tenma, he was jealous, and as Trisha had predicted, he was indeed thinking it was all because of her weapons that she could do this. If it wasn't for the weapons, she wouldn't even be able to harm him. If she didn't have those weapons, she wouldn't be arrogant like this. Tenma thought to himself, well, if it wasn't for her capabilities, she wouldn't have gotten them anyways. A deep voice chuckled, but no one could hear it. What capabilities? She just got lucky. Tenma clicked his tongue. TSK, denial, huh? No matter. She's going to die anyways. Though why didn't you attempt this test? You could be getting my help inside right now, but instead you're here watching her do this. The voice asked. There were too many risks. If the monster couldn't be harmed, that was essentially delivering myself on a platter to be eaten. Tenma replied. And that's the difference between you two. She can take risks and has the capability to figure out the problem and keep herself alive. You can't take that risk since you fear death. Are you saying she doesn't fear death? I think she does, but she has the confidence and skill to elude death. Why else do you think she can go in without any information and stay alive till this point? The voice laughed as Tenma only stayed silent and watched carefully. Dashing around the giant's body, Shiro continuously pierced him with her spear and bow combo. While she wasn't able to deal any major damage, she was able to poke a few small holes around his body, causing some blood to flow. Naturally, this annoyed the hell out of the giant as he repeatedly attempted to fry Shiro with his fire breath. But Shiro could now save herself every time he did that since she understood that he stayed still when he breathed fire, which meant that he couldn't shatter her defenses with a flex of his muscles during this. However, while she was running around, she couldn't find a good chance to give him a decent injury since all of her attacks merely poked him a little. She did try to attack his orifices, but every time she tried it would be blocked by a wave of his hands, furrowing her brows. Shiro tried to look for any other potential weaknesses, but the only one she could think of was the one down below, but that was in the portal, which didn't show her what was on the other side. She was tempted to just jump in and stab him, but there was the problem of whether or not she could get out again. While she liked taking risks, she wasn't a fan of jumping into random portals where she knows it's most likely a prison, considering the fact that the champion was locked up and had a spike through his chest. Biting her lips slightly, Shiro decided to give wounding him severely another shot. If that doesn't work, then she can try the portal, summoning Nivlam. She dodged his grab and wrapped some chains around his wrist, using that as a pivot. She swung herself up onto his shoulder and dashed towards his head. Seeing this, the giant tried to grab her with his other hand, but she managed to dodge through his fingertips thanks to her power of flight, creating a concentrated orb of air in her hands. She slammed it against his head, asterisk bang, forcing him to tilt the other way. Shiro quickly wrapped her chain around his neck before continuing with his right wrist. With both his wrists and his neck tied up by her chain, Shiro forced the chain to shrink itself, asterisk KSH, since the chain will continue to shrink without any resistances. The giant watched as his arms came closer to his head. Plus, unlike the attachment sword, the chains themselves couldn't be broken, so Shiro didn't need to worry about the giant breaking one of her most helpful blessed weapons. However, Shiro couldn't help but wish the spear could have been affected by this, since it would have allowed her to apply stacks to increase her physical parameters further, digging her heels to the ground. Shiro had to fight against the giant trying to pull his hands away, but this was exactly what she had wanted. Once she was sure she couldn't hold on anymore, she let go of the chains, without Shiro restraining it. The chains whipped out towards the giant's head since he had pulled his arm away, widening his eyes. He watched as the chains whipped his right eye, *ARGG. Crying out in pain, the giant hunched over and grabbed his right eye as blood started to flow out of the wound, glaring at Shiro. The giant pulled his fist back before punching at her. Seems like that injured his eye a little, but didn't do much else other than that. Shiro thought with a frown before glancing at her chains, as well as the portal. She wondered what would happen if she forced the giant back down. Would he be sealed away again, or would he just climb out? Debating to herself for a moment, Shiro took a deep breath and decided to risk it. Error. Distract him for as long as you can. Shiro commanded as Error flickered in a nodding motion, wrapping her spear with Error. Shiro pulled back on her body and fired it towards the giant's wounded eye. *ping. Blocking the arrow with his hand, the giant watched as Error bloomed out of the spear like a flower and slithered through his hands. *gh. Crying out in pain, he could feel Error trying to enter his body through his eye as he quickly grabbed one of the circuits and tried to pull Error off his body, while the giant was preoccupied with this. Shiro made sure her chain was secured properly before diving into the portal. With her chain secured, she could now pull herself back through if needed. The moment she dived through, it felt like gravity had increased by 100 times as her body was instantly dragged down. *clang. Furrowing her brows, Shiro could see that her arm was trying its best to keep itself together while holding onto the chains. Looking around her, she widened her eyes in surprise and shock. From the darkness of this realm, she could barely see anything except for the giant's lower half, which was completely surrounded in chains that extended into the unknown in the distance. She could see pairs of eyes slowly opening as the feeling of danger increased with every pair that opened, similar to when she faced up against the Tier 6 Guardian. There was only one thing on Shiro's mind: I need to run. Quickly getting her chains to retract themselves, Shiro realized that the speed of retraction was now much slower than what she had expected. Quickly activating her divinity, she used her power of flight to try to speed things up. While it did indeed speed things up, it didn't speed it up by much. Feeling their presences come closer and closer, Shiro looked up and saw that she still had a while to go since she didn't expect the sudden increase to gravity. Activating a part of her divinity, she stopped the monsters from being able to fly. However, all that she accomplished with that was forcing some of the eyes to bob down slightly before returning to normal. They're too powerful to stop them from flying, huh? Makes sense considering the fact that they can fly in this kind of condition. Shiro thought to herself as cold sweat started to drip down her face, trying her best to climb up the chains. Shiro understood that the monsters would arrive before she could climb out. Furrowing her brows, she decided to do something drastic. While climbing up, she started to chant the spell required to activate the portal to the spirit world. Since the spirit world is like a mirror of this world, it means that this place was probably accessible from the spirit world, or at least a clone of it. Even if it's a clone, it was better than facing these guys. I wouldn't open a gate if I was you. A voice suddenly called out as Shiro looked around in shock. Don't bother looking around, you can't see me. I've been here for a long time, so my visions have gotten used to it. But let me give you a tip. Don't open a gate here. If you do, you'll let the wardens out into the world. They're not able to exit through the main portal, but if you create one for them, they'll escape. The voice chuckled. Who are you? Shiro asked while still climbing up. Just a prisoner of Nyx like the big guy over there. I suppose you can call this Nyx's personal prison, where she keeps those she finds interesting. The voice replied. I was surprised to see the big guy get lifted up and allowed partial freedom, but it seems like it was because you were doing a trial and Nyx decided to send him as the final obstacle. Did you annoy her or something? Why else would she send someone like him? Her final champion is weaker than him, you know. The voice asked as Shiro only shrugged to the best of her abilities. Who knows? I just want to get out. Shiro replied. Good luck, though none of us has been able to escape. The voice chuckled before things returned to normal around her, furrowing her brows. Shiro tried her best to climb up. However, after a few minutes of climbing, Shiro understood that she wasn't going to reach the top, gritting her teeth. Shiro glared at the monsters that were approaching her. F***ck it if I can't get back up, I'll take some of you F***ers with me. Shiro said as the first monster revealed itself. What the fuck? Nyx stood up the moment she saw Shiro jump into the portal while Gaia face-palmed. Shit, I should have just blocked up that portal. Why the hell did the crazy girl enter there? Nyx said as she currently had a face of disbelief. Because she was struggling against the giant. I think she thought the portal was a clue of sorts. If I was in her shoes, I wouldn't expect it to lead to your toughest prison either. Gaia sighed. Yes, but who jumps into a portal that they know nothing about? Her. Gaia pointed at Shiro as Nyx stayed silent. I should have taken that into account when I summoned the giant. Nyx slumped down as tapped the table a few times. The longer she stays in there, the harder it is for her to get out. Once the prison has left its mark on her, she'll be trapped there forever. Nyx frowned. Can't you just give her the key or something? Gaia asked. Normally I could, but since she's in the middle of a trial, I can't influence it directly like that. The most I can do is darken the sky or make things harder. I can't make things easier. The system won't allow it. Giving her the key means making things easier. Nyx explained as Gaia frowned. She should still be able to petrify the monsters in there, right? Nope. The wardens that I placed in there are immune to any special statuses like being frozen or petrified. You have to kill them with brute force. And even then, their defenses are quite high. The only good news is that they don't have any magic themselves, and the most they can do is bite or claw at you. Nyx shook her head. But they're still physically superior, right? Gaia raised her eyebrow. They're equal to people who have 5 divinities. Nyx coughed awkwardly. Sigh. What can we do then? Gaia asked as she wasn't keen on letting Shiro die like this in the trial. Not much. But there is someone whom I can enlist. Nyx frowned. Who? The person whom she talked to. Nyx snapped her finger and changed the view to reveal a person locked up in chains. He had long gray hair that had lost its color after being locked away in the prison for so long. His body was surprisingly thin as he looked like. He'd break with a single breath. Marked on his body was the faint sigils belonging to different divinities that looked as though they were about to completely fade away. Currently, he is looking at Shiro as she was keeping her guard up. You want to enlist his help? Gaia frowned. Amen. Nyx nodded. How are you sure that he'll even help you out? Didn't you put him in this state after he failed your tower and betrayed the spirit race? I'm not, hence why I'm able to enlist his help. By having him help, it technically makes the trial harder as we don't know what he'll do. Plus, he technically didn't betray the spirit race. You know his personality before. Hopefully Shiro can persuade him to help her, but for now, undoing his chains should tell him about what needs to be done. Nyx frowned. You're gambling with chances right now. When have I not been gambling when it comes to Shiro? Nyx laughed. As the spirit was watching Shiro hang on the chain with all her strength. He felt a tiny bit of power of which he hadn't felt in hundreds of years, widening his eyes. He looked up at the sky in shock. Kishing. Feeling the chains undo themselves one by one. The spirit could feel his power returning to him, furrowing his brows. He looked towards Shiro and frowned. She must be really important for you to let me free after I almost destroyed the world, huh, Nyx? The spirit muttered quietly. Sitting down in the air, he rested his cheeks on his hand and crossed his legs. I'll see what she does first. She'll have to impress me quite a bit if you want me to help her. The spirit said while giving Nyx a middle finger. Holding onto the chain. Shiro summoned her spear and watched her surroundings with caution, feeling danger all around her. There wasn't much she could sew since it was hard to move with her just hanging on a chain. Glancing towards the giant, she frowned and decided to use his body for now. Swinging herself a little, she let go of the chain and crashed into the chains that bound his lower half. Just as she did this, a scythe-like arm cleaved toward her as she quickly ducked down, letting the scythe cut the giant instead. Pushi. Watching the scythe cut deep into the giant, she could hear a hollow echo of a scream above her as she widened her eyes in shock. Understanding that a single hit would kill her, Shiro had to make sure she is careful with what she did, or else she'll be cut in half instantly. Weaving her way through the chains, she kept herself as hidden as possible while countless eyes were searching for her as she was weaving through the chains. Sweat continued to pour from her body as each step was taken with great difficulty, taking the chance to rest up occasionally. Shiro tried her best to climb up with the help of chains since she remembered that there were a few chains that were visible from outside the portal. If she could use them to get out, she'll be free to go. Just as she poked her head out, she came face to face with a crocodile-like creature that had a blanket of darkness which twitched around him, opening his mouth. Countless hands reached out for her as Shiro quickly ducked down and managed to dodge with the help of the gravity. Looking up, she could see that the hands started to eat away at the giant's body. Holy sh*t. Shiro thought to herself as these monsters easily breached the giant's defenses like nothing. However, what was more impressive was that the more damage he sustained, the faster he regenerated. Even the cut from before had healed up more or less. Taking her time to make her way up with care, she managed to evade most of the monsters thanks to using the giant's body as a shield along with the chains. But just as she reached out for the portal, a reflective barrier of sorts deflected her hand, which caused her to widen her eyes. Time's up. The spirit thought as the prison had left the weakest mark now. If Shiro wanted to escape, it'll be very difficult. To make matters worse, the longer she stayed here, the stronger the mark becomes. After all, everyone who was still alive here was able to survive the torment of the wardens, which proves their strength. The longer they survive, the harder it is for them to escape. Shaking his head, he believed that Shiro would probably struggle for a bit before giving up since from what he could tell, her physique was only equal to 4 divinities at most. For her to escape, she'll need to have the physique of 5 divinities. However, giving up was something Shiro doesn't do often. Trying to escape again, Shiro gritted her teeth and pushed as hard as she could, but her hand was deflected once more. This time the repulsion sent her body back as one of the monsters tried to eat her up, clicking her tongue. She activated her spirit nature and sent out a wave of ice chains which froze the monster for a moment, but they managed to break out of it in an instant. TCH. Clicking her tongue, Shiro clasped her hands together as ice erupted out around her and pushed her to safety. Undoing her spirit nature, Shiro furrowed her brows and summoned Nivlim. Glancing at the giant's body, she started to apply stacks so that she could boost herself. During that second attempt, she could feel the barrier budge ever so slightly, so she knew she needed more strength. While she was doing this, the spirit had long sat up in shock. So she was the queen. I was thinking I might have guessed wrong. The spirit muttered as he stood up. If Shiro doesn't get out in the next 10 minutes, he was going to force his way out with her. This was his repayment for sabotaging the spirit race hundreds of years ago. Applying the maximum number of stacks on the giant's body, Shiro consumed them all and looked up at the portal. Feeling much lighter now that her physique was reinforced, Shiro didn't spare any second and charged up towards the portal, swinging herself to avoid the wardens that were trying to eat her. Shiro twisted herself and pushed for the portal. *TSS. Feeling the barrier once again, Shiro narrowed her eyes and pushed harder with Nivlim. However, she couldn't stay in the same spot for long since the wardens were just behind her, pushing herself to the side. Shiro managed to dodge out of one of their jaws as she watched the warden crash against the barrier, which caused it to vibrate heavily before knocking him back, narrowing her eyes. She took this chance to try to force her way through the barrier once more, feeling the surface budge a little. Joy filled her heart, but this joy was soon extinguished as several wardens launched ranged attacks at her if she pressed on to try to escape. She'd be cut in half, but if she retreated, she might lose this chance. Gritting her teeth, Shiro could only choose to go back for now since more chances will appear. Dodging their attacks, Shiro wondered what she could do. Right now, all she needed was for something to distract these wardens long enough so that she can force her way through. Just as she thought of this, she watched the barrier open slightly as air returned to her right hand. Quickly jumping up, she didn't want to miss this opportunity. Activating her spirit nature again, a raging blizzard exploded out, obscuring her from the warden's sight. Pushing as hard as she could, Shiro could feel her hand pushing through the barrier. Gritting her teeth, she continued to push since she could tell that the wardens were searching for her right now. However, all of the wardens opened their jaws at the same time and prepared a breath attack towards the blizzard. Even if they don't target Shiro directly, it'll hit her regardless. You've got to be kidding me, Shiro thought to herself since it was a bit late to move into cover. Plus, Even if she was to move into cover, the breath is probably going to hit her regardless. Watching the flames approach her, Shiro gritted her teeth and was about to release her hand to make some defenses, but before she could, a hand tapped her on the shoulder. Glancing back, she could see a man with gray hair that seemed like it used to be black, along with a set of black eyes which had heavy bags under them. Ignoring her looks, the man reached his hand forward and snapped his finger as if pressing the pause button. The time around them seemed to stop and the flames were halted in midair. "We've got plenty of time to waste now. Just focus on getting out first," the spirit said as Shiro furrowed her brows but nodded eventually. She recognized the voice but didn't know why he was helping her. Plus, if he could freeze time like this, it meant that he had obtained Chronos divinity. However, this only leads her to ask one question. Why didn't he do this before? But right now her main concern was to just get out alive. Pulling her hand back with Nivlam, Shiro gathered her strength and pierced forward. Now that she had the free time to focus on piercing this barrier, it didn't take long for the barrier to rip apart like a piece of cloth. Jumping up, Shiro managed to climb out of the prison and land in the arena once more. Breathing out heavily, Shiro glanced back and saw that the spirit reached out for the weak point that she had created, grabbing it with his right hand. He swiped his hand aside, and the gap widened instantly, cracking his neck. The man landed next to Shiro and looked around. "Nothing. Much has changed, and I see a few familiar faces." He smirked while glancing at the sisters before, narrowing his eyes at Tenma with some slight killing intent. "So, who are you and why did you help?" Shiro asked with a frown. "Me? Well, I was a prisoner of Nyx, but she decided to free me to help you. You would have died there if I didn't intervene." The man shrugged. "And your name?" Shiro asked. "Wait, you don't know my name?" The man raised his eyebrow and glanced at Shiro with confusion. "Should I know your name?" "Well, aren't you the Spirit Queen? Surely you'll recognize the great betrayer that almost killed you all." The man asked. "My circumstances are a little special." Shiro shrugged. I see. So as the Spirit Queen, what do you think you should do in this situation?" he asked as he leaned now and narrowed his eyes at Shiro. "What do you want me to do? I can't kill you, nor do I plan to since you helped me. Plus, since Nyx freed you to help me, it means you're probably the best choice compared to the other prisoners." Shiro replied while not backing down to his gaze. "And you realize that she can't do anything if I want to kill you, right?" The spirit glared at her with killing intent, as Shiro glared back with her own killing intent. "I know, but that doesn't mean I will back down without a fight." Feeling her killing intent, the spirit grinned. "I like you. You're not spineless. A few people have told me that." "What's new?" Shiro shrugged back. Funny. Anyways, since I'm here, I might as well tell you that as you are right now, there is no way for you to clear this tower." "Huh? What?" Shiro furrowed her brows. "You haven't tapped into the real power of the sixth sense. While your senses are superb, you haven't pushed it past the boundary yet. The key of this trial is to push your senses past this boundary. Once you achieve this, the fights will become easier for you." "How would pushing it past the boundary help with this fight?" "I can barely harm the big bastard." Shiro pointed at the giant. "Oh, you'll understand once you push it past the boundary. I wasn't able to before, hence why I failed this tower. I can tell you how you can try to, but grasping it is a whole nother matter for you." The spirit smirked. "I doubt I'll be able to do it in a short amount of time." "You probably have a limit to stop time, don't you?" Shiro asked. "Maybe. You don't know. But I can tell you now that I can stop time for much longer than you think." The spirit smiled as Shiro nodded. "I'll tell you the method. Whether or not you can grasp it is up to you. I'll give you a bit of help at the start, but I'll leave after a day." Hearing this, Shiro understood that he could freeze time for more than a day. After learning about this, she couldn't help but wonder how much energy this requires along with how it influences the outside world. "Wait, if you can stop time for more than a day, why is Nyx's tower higher ranked than Chronos?" Shiro asked curiously. Well, it depends, but you don't need to know. Anyways, I'll teach you about how you can try to grasp this, I suppose." "Okay, but one more question." "Go. Why are you helping me this much? You've already escorted me out of the prison." Shiro asked. Hearing this, the spirit stayed silent for a bit before looking back at her. "I guess it's to repay my crimes of betraying the spirit race. The best way is to help the Spirit Queen." Seeing that he had no intention so say anything more, Shiro nodded her head. ###*sigh. sighing in relief. Nyx relaxed in her chair as the spirit decided to help Shiro in the end. Seems like she's on his good side. Gaia chuckled, seeing the spirit teach Shiro how to push past the border of her sixth sense. Amen. He's also telling her the secret to my tower too, which saves me the effort. Nyx chuckled. What do you think will happen when she masters it? What do I think will happen? Let's see. It's going to become very hard to hit her even for powerful queens and gods. The only thing that will limit her, then, is her body. Nyx grinned. The key to pushing past the boundary for her sixth sense was special awareness. Like her sword domain, which allows her to have a key understanding of her surroundings when using her sword. Grasping the feeling of pushing past the boundary was special awareness of this dimension, similar to what happens when a person enters her sword domain. The same need to happen with her sixth sense. Normally, people drag their intent to the real world, such as materializing their killing intent in the form of an aura or such. To push past the boundary, she needed to do the reverse of this all. Wrong, the spirit said while attacking Shiro with a few light jabs, backing off slightly. Shiro gritted her teeth and tried her best to parry his attacks once more. Peering into this realm allows you see the shifts in the world, which tells you where the attacks are along with where the intents are aimed at. I need you to home in on this sense and block out the other senses, with your mind only focused on this. It should allow you to peer into this new world. The spirit explained as his hand flickered out of sight and several jabs could be seen indented on Shiro's clothes, which forced her back by a few steps. How can I block out the other senses? My senses are dialed up to 100. They're extra sensitive. Shiro forced a smile since she had practiced the martial art which heightened her senses so that she could react better. Hearing this, the spirit frowned for a moment before shaking his head. It doesn't matter. The last and only person to have completed Nyx's trial was sensitive too. The guy couldn't even eat normal food or smell things properly. He had to eat watered-down food and keep his nose blocked, or else it'll cause him pain. However, despite all this, he was still able to pass the tower. Don't tell me you think it's impossible. Nonsense. If he can do it, so can I. All I'm asking is how I can achieve it. 2. If I knew, I would have passed Nyx's trial already. The spirit rolled his eyes. All right, smartass. Shiro shrugged before tearing off a bit of her dress into a blind fold, wrapping it around her eyes along with blocking her nose and ears. Shiro took a deep breath and entered a defensive stance. Seeing that she was ready, the spirit nodded, flicking his wrist. He sent out a few jabs as Shiro tried her best to sense these attacks using her sixth sense, but her skin tingled from the feeling of danger. Trying her best to dodge or parry these attacks, Shiro became frustrated since her skin continued to stop her from focusing on the sixth sense. How can I stop this? Shiro thought to herself while barely managing to parry one of the attacks that he had sent to her, gritting her teeth. She tried to assign half of her attention to blocking out her senses of touch, but that didn't help. I need a way to stop the sense of touch. As she was thinking about this, an idea appeared in her mind. Right now, the killing intent as well as the sense of danger was causing her skin to tingle since her instincts are telling her to dodge. Therefore, if she was the one on the offensive and pushed the spirit back, there was the potential that she could attain this breakthrough. Making a decision, she dropped into an offensive stance before dashing at the spirit, raising his eyebrow. The spirit was about to counter when a wave of killing intent wrapped around him, as if a spider had just wrapped her webs around his body. He found it suffocating and hard to move for a moment, flickering in front of him. The spirit watched as Shiro's sword cut towards his neck. However, before it landed, he felt a sense of danger behind him. *ping. Flicking his wrist, he managed to block Shiro's first attack, but her second was very light, almost like it was a feather, widening his eyes. He didn't expect that her offensive state was this close to pushing past the boundaries. Reaching out, he removed her makeshift earplugs. Emin, what happened? Shiro asked. How do you usually fight? He asked. Aggressively? I don't defend much since my defenses are paper thin. Shiro replied. I see. We'll go with baby steps then. Let's see if you can touch upon the boundary of the offensive side of this. The spirit grinned. From his initial promise of one day, it soon became a week, then a month. In this frozen time, Shiro never felt hunger, but she did indeed feel fatigue. Taking a break every so often, she had gotten used to releasing her killing intent to sense the things around her. To help her some more, they had made sure that her sight, smell, and hearing were blocked at all times. While they couldn't do much about her sense of touch, they could at least guarantee that this sense is at a minimum while she is on the offensive. After 2 months of training, the spirit could tell that Shiro was so close on the boundary, but there was something missing. It was as though a thin veil blocked her out from this special state, but he couldn't tell what it was since he was in the same situation. Plus, time was now running out, and he couldn't stop time for much longer. "We're stopping here," he said while Shiro took off. Her blind fold and instantly shielded her eyes. "CK the light." She clicked her tongue. Not seeing for 2 months does that to you." Kitas smirked as Shiro learned of his name during the 2 months they had spent in suspended time. "No sh*t. So why are we stopping here?" Shiro asked. "I can't stop time for much longer. If your senses are blocked when we exit, the giant will crush you in one go." Kitas grinned. True. Arg. It's so annoying. I'm so close but so far." Shiro sighed. "PFT welcome. I've been having this kind of feeling for King centuries." Kitas smirked as Shiro's cursing habits have slowly rubbed off on him as he cursed more often as well now. "So how does it feel to have me catch up in just 2 months?" Shiro grinned. "Absolutely jealous. It took me so long to reach this state. However, the older generation paves an easy path for the new, so you should be grateful, kid. If it wasn't for my efforts, you wouldn't have it so easy." Kitas shrugged. "You chose to teach me, old man. Don't complain now." Shiro rolled her eyes as Kitas nodded. "True. We got about a minute before this time stop expires, so I'll leave the arena now. Good luck with the giant. With you being so close to the boundaries, it should help you out a little." Kitas smirked and flickered away from his spot. "Che, old man didn't even let me say good ye." Shiro clicked her tongue before cracking her neck, bringing out her sword. She narrowed her eyes at the giant and took a deep breath. After a minute, time resumed as the giant thrashed his hands around for a moment before looking down at her in shock. The last thing he remembered was fending off the red circuit, which dived down into the portal. But now Shiro was standing in front of him once more. "Sup? It's been a while." Shiro grinned and flickered towards the giant. ####, sitting down tiredly. Kitas looked at Shiro's fight from the distance while glancing at his sigils. Chipped off more years than I had initially expected." He muttered. Originally, he was going to stop time for a week at most for Shiro, but instead, he spent 2 months training with her. In total. That was around 600 years shaved off his long lifespan, since he was granted a much longer life than usual thanks to Kronos' divinity. But with the large chunk that he had expended to help Shiro, his body was now feeling a lot weaker than before. "Well, I guess it was worth it. She helped me realize a few things too." He chuckled while looking up at the sky. "Is this repayment good enough?" He muttered before glancing back down at Shiro. Summoning her spear and sword, she dashed towards the giant, flicking to the side. She dodged his strike with ease. "I know it seems like it's only been a few seconds, but trust me, I've been away for 2 months, and it was rather enlightening." Shiro laughed, throwing her sword up. Shiro used it as a grappling hook to swing herself up to his shoulder, twirling her spear. Shiro parried his grab to the side. However, while she has almost breached the boundary for the attack form, she wasn't close just yet for her defensive style, so this move was a little forced, but her goal had been reached, feeling the reverberations in her body. Shiro narrowed her eyes and jumped towards the head, closing her eyes. She sent out a wave of killing intent which wrapped around the entire area. Envisioning the whole arena in her mind, Shiro could see the small movements that the giant was making, crouching as low as she could. She flickered forward, twisting her body. She thrust her sword towards his head. Bang. Just as the giant blocked her strike, a web of slashes appeared behind his head, causing him to crash forward. Seeing this, the sisters widened their eyes in shock while Quella was still trying to recover from the initial surprise of seeing Shiro suddenly reappear. From her perspective, she watched as Shiro dive into the portal and the circuit following after her once it finished tormenting the giant. Next thing she knew, Shiro was back again feeling more confident than ever. What the hell just happened? Quella muttered in confusion. Meanwhile, Tenma was in the same situation. I see what happened. The voice cackled in Tenma's mind. What happened? Why is she able to push the giant back like that now? Previously, she wasn't like this. Tima asked. An old friend helped her out. For her to make so much improvement in such a short amount of time, he must have expended quite a bit of his lifespan to freeze time. We can expect that we won't be fighting him. Who are you talking about? You don't know them, but they were the second closest person in history to complete the Nyx Tower. He must have told her about the special boundary. Thankfully, it seems like she hasn't grasped it properly. If she did, I'd say you should give up trying to kill her. Why? Because the last person to have ever grasped this boundary was never hit by any attacks thereafter. Not even I could harm him. Hearing this, Timo widened his eyes and cursed the fact that Shiro got lucky and was actually tutored about this special boundary. What can we do then? If we fight, how do you fight her? Just follow my instructions and trust me. Those that have not grasped the boundary properly will show signs of weakness, and we'll take advantage of that. So far, I know that she has to manually close her eyes to actually attack with the pseudo-boundary that she has grasped. The voice replied, nodding his head. Tenma watched Shiro carefully. ####, after sending the head crashing forward. Shiro flicked her wrist and summoned her axe, twisting her body. She gathered all her strength and slammed it against the nape of his neck. *bang. The collision of the two caused a small shockwave to explode out as Shiro was forced back by a few steps. However, she wasn't finished just yet. Hurling the axe towards the giant's head, Shiro summoned her spear and notched it into her body. Jumping up, she narrowed her eyes at the giant's ear and fired her bow, feeling danger. The giant covered his ears with his hands as the spear drew a bit of blood, but that was it. However, that was also fine as Shiro watched the axe clash against his skull and bounce into the air, flickering towards the axe. She grabbed the handle before twisting her body. Swinging the axe with everything she's got, Shiro narrowed her eyes and enchanted her axe with petrification. *KRRR. Slamming it down, Shiro watched as blood spurted out and was instantly turned to stone. Petrification tried to spread across his head, but the speed was slow. Eventually, the petrification stopped and broke off on its own. *Yura. Forcing his body upright, the flames in his eyes flickered brighter as the markings around his body were set aflame. Looking like the incarnation of Satan, the giant pulled his hand back before punching towards Shiro. While this happened, Warehouse I.P.S of fire erupted out from the ground and struck towards her. Restriction of magic. Activating one of her restrictions that she wanted to save. A pulse of energy expanded out from Shiro as all the flames were extinguished in a single moment, widening his eyes in shock. The giant looked around him with confusion. While the giant was confused, Shiro closed her eyes and dropped into an offensive stance. Releasing her killing intent, she stomped down as hard as she could so that she could push herself to her top speed in an instant. *bang. Shattering the ground around her, Shiro's body disappeared and reappeared in front of the giant's eye, which was no longer burning thanks to her restriction of magic. Piercing forward with her sword, Shiro stabbed deep into his iris, but she wasn't done yet. More sword strikes started to appear as she dug her way through into his head, cleaving her way in. She knew that her best choice would be to destroy/petrify his brain since his regeneration was very strong. Cutting upwards, Shiro understood that she was now at the brain, stabbing her sword up with petrification enchantment. She wrapped her chain around her spear before jamming it horizontally inside his head. Holding the chains, she jumped out before she was crushed by his finger. Just as she jumped out, she could see a hand reach towards her as she grinned, extending the chains. She wrapped it around his wrist as he tried to grab her, tightening the chains. Shiro watched as the spear was forcefully dragged out of his eye socket. *crack. Ripping out a bit of his face along with his skull, the brain was exposed for the entire world to see. Summoning her spear next to her, Shiro twirled it in her hand before notching it in her bow. Enchanting it with her petrification magic, she fired the spear towards the exposed brain. *puchy eye. Piercing deeply into the brain, petrification started to spread but halted after a certain point. Clicking her tongue, Shiro tugged on the chain and dragged herself back up towards the brain while using her power of flight to dodge his grabs, remembering what her future self has said about trying to concentrate the powers of her spells. Shiro clasped her hands together and created a concentrated orb of air, focusing her mind. She then activated Gaia's divinity, which allowed her to send out a pulse of petrification energy. But this time, she condensed it inside the orb of air so that it was akin to a ticking time bomb, arriving in front of the half-petrified brain. Shiro curled her lips into a grin and jammed her fist in as deep as she could, jumping back before it detonated. She watched as his two hands reached towards her, grabbing her sword. She closed her eyes and sent out a wave of killing intent once more. Asterisk bang bang. As if suddenly hit by two large clubs, the hands were moved off their initial path and missed Shiro narrowly, if not for Aurena's divinity. The wind generated by the two hands passing her would have thrown her off course, glaring at the giant. Shiro smirked and snapped her finger. Asterisk bang. Exploding into a tornado, the wind started to shred up his brain while the petrification flashed within his head, turning the shredded brain matter to stone so that they couldn't regenerate, crashing against the barrier. The petrifying light wanted to reach the outside world, but the barrier stood firm. With nowhere else to go, the light was reflected back at the giant. Asterisk KRRR. Watching as a layer of stone formed on the giant's body. The sisters in Tenma were speechless since the second time she appeared, she was the oppressive side rather than the giant. You have completed the skip. Seeing this notification, Shiro smiled as a gate opened up in front of her, eye in the distance. Kiedis grinned seeing her success and disappeared from his spot. Hashtag. Yes, she did it. Nyx cheered as Gaia could only chuckle seeing Nyx's joy, but she was the same. However, after the initial joy came worry, since she now had to face Tower's final boss. Entering the gate, Shiro was not overwhelmed by any sources of light or loud sound. It was completely silent and devoid of light. Nothing could be seen, not even her own hands. Well, it's not the most desirable, but at least my eyes aren't blinded by the might of the sun. Shiro shrugged as she preferred this kind of dungeon instead. Since she didn't have to shield her eyes, strangely enough, there was not a single notification from her system, as she couldn't even see that anymore. Without the familiar view of her system interface, Shiro could see that this sort of situation would be quite traumatic for someone. Surrounded with silence on all sides, and their system couldn't be seen. It would make one think that they were already dead. However, this was nothing to Shiro, closing her eyes. Not that it did anything in this kind of environment. Shiro summoned her sword and released her killing intent. However, just as she did this, she felt danger all around her. *T. Cursing in her mind, Shiro immediately backed off and slashed towards the points that she felt danger from. *Kish. Hearing the sound of two metal-like objects hitting one another, Shiro knew that she hit her mark, but the chances of it actually doing something was slim, furrowing her brows. Shiro prepared herself for the next attack, but nothing happened, tilting her head. Shiro wondered if the monster only reacted to her killing intent, stepping forward a few times. Shiro couldn't feel danger anymore, which only served to give her a sense of unease since she knew danger was right in front of her. But there was no killing intent, no intent to harm her, nor was there the sound of it breathing or moving around. Everything was silent. Frowning slightly, Shiro decided to release her killing intent once more as danger surged around her, summoning her spear. She tried to parry one of the attacks, but the force sent her crashing across the ground and into a wave. Kuh. Coughing out some blood, Shiro could feel the force traveling through her body as she quickly drank some medicine. So I know the monster so far is very sensitive to killing intent. But with the lack of vision, I don't know how big he is, nor do I know how big the room is. I need a way to see in this darkness without making the monster aggressive. Shiro thought with a frown while forcing herself to stand up. I guess the first step is to map out this room manually first, placing her right hand against the wall. Shiro tried her best to walk silently, but it was kind of hard as the heels of her boots would clack against the ground. Feeling her hair stand on end as if someone was watching her, Shiro tried her best to keep her breathing even and calmed her mind. After walking around for a while, she had finally mapped out where the walls are, and so far it was a circle with a radius of roughly 400 meters. As for the height, she didn't know just yet, but from the size of this boss room, she could guess that the boss was rather large, leaning against the wall. Shiro was in a stalemate of sorts against the monster, even though that wasn't the case in reality. So far, she had experimented with releasing her aura to do the same, but the monster was highly sensitive to any kind of aura that she used. If not for her mastery of suppressing her aura, she would have had to face the monster's continuous bombardment of attacks. Crossing her arms, she had a frown on her face since this was a difficult fight. Since she had no energy signal right now, the monster couldn't track her either. With neither of them being able to track one another, they were in a situation where they couldn't do anything until they revealed their intent to the other. No wonder Kiedis said that only when I break past the boundary can I pass. However, unlike me, he didn't have the leisure to just sit around without attacking. Once I get past the boundary, I'll be able to sense the area around me without even releasing my killing intent. It'll be like me being able to access the rift. If I can do the same with this boundary, I'll be able to take the initiative in fighting this boss. Shiro furrowed her brows. Thinking about it for a moment, Shiro wondered if the monster could sense sound. When she arrived, she had talked to herself and made some noise, but he didn't attack, so there wasn't much she could guess from that. Thinking about it for a moment, she decided to summon her spear and throw it towards the center of the room, staying silent. She perked her ears up and listened carefully. Asterisk ping. Just as she heard the sound of her spear hitting against something, she heard the sound of the spear getting knocked back. Feeling danger, she quickly ducked down. Asterisk crack. Hearing the sound of her spear stabbing into the wall, Shiro grabbed it with her hand and pulled it out. Probably shouldn't throw it into the center where he might be if I'm seeing if he could sense sound. Shiro facepalmed at her own stupidity before throwing her spear to the side. However, unlike before, there were no movements, so Shiro could guess that the monster only really reacted to the sense touch and intent, which was pretty much the same as her. Wait, is the monster on the edge of the boundary too? Shiro wondered to herself, as this meant that they were essentially equal if one ignored the fact that their physical power differed greatly. Narrowing her eyes, she tried to remember everything she knew about the only person to have ever passed this test in addition to this. She tried to remember everything that Kiedis had told her. She needed to be able to tap into this state naturally, like breathing. Like the reflection of the water, she needed to be able to see everything without disturbing the surface at all. Only when she saw what she wanted to hit does she strike, and when that happens, everything reacts. However, she couldn't use her energy, or else the enemy will find her. She couldn't use her intent either, as the enemy was sensitive to this feeling. Furrowing her brows, Shiro sighed heavily and sat down. She was going to compile all of the information she knew and analyze it slowly. #####. She actually passed. Quella cheered happily with the other sisters, who were also excited since she should have a good chance to pass, right? She had 2 divinities, which makes her essentially the strongest human in the Forgotten Realms. While they didn't know the details in regards to the Tower of Nyx, it shouldn't be too difficult. While they were cheering, both Trisha and Beryl returned. Where's Shiro? Or has she passed already? Beryl asked curiously, seeing the empty area with clear signs of battle slowly being repaired by the tower. Shiro managed to defeat the final guardian and has now entered the tower. Quella nodded her head as Beryl smiled. Amen. That's good. Is Mr. Tenma going to attempt the skip test now? Trisha asked as she glanced towards Tenma, who flinched a little when his name was called. Amen. I just need a moment to digest the information. He nodded. However, his reply caused both Beryl and Quella to frown, since Shiro had completed the skip without prior preparation, and yet even after Shiro essentially showed him the way, he was still hesitant? What kind of hero was this? Say, sis, how did we even get a hero like him anyways? Quella whispered over to Beryl's ears. Who knows? I wasn't there when he was picked. If they picked him on talent alone, I guess that's understandable, but his personality is rather unfit. I'll have to go back and ask about which sister chose him. Beryl whispered back as Quella nodded her head. They're speaking about how unfit you are to be a hero, ha. And I have to say, I agree. The voice laughed. Shut up. She's not normal. Did you see how she fights? She's crazy. Tenma retorted as the voice only laughed. That's why I agree with them. You're spineless. However, just leave it to me. I'll help you pass the skip. Whether or not you can pass it is down to how well you follow my instructions. The voice said as Tenma nodded and walked towards the skip, narrowing their eyes at him. Both Trisha and Beryl kept their attention on everything he did, experimenting a few times by releasing her intent. Shiro exchanged several attacks with the monster. Naturally, she lost each time, but in doing so she managed to gain some more information about this boundary. Comparing it to the information she knew about the one who had passed, Shiro understood that the key was grasping her surroundings without the use of energy or intent. It had to be a passive sense of sorts. For example, it would be akin to having a third eye that allows you to see the world without the use of energy or intent. Perhaps I need to use something more familiar as a medium. Shiro thought to herself as she started to envision a grid-like environment around her, furrowing her brows. She had an idea, but doing this would be very risky as she'd be fighting against the monster until it worked. Her idea was to constantly release her intent and fine-tune it every second until the monster could no longer detect her, cracking her neck. Shiro decided to go with this approach for now, since it was better than just sitting around and theorizing to herself. Summoning her sword and spear, Shiro released her intent and formed a grid around the room, sensing a large object forcing its way through her grid and swinging his claws at her. Shiro dashed forward and ducked down so that the claw barely missed her, slashing out with her sword. Several sword slashes appeared in the space in front of the monster and crashed against their hard armor, but no substantial injuries were left behind. Frowning slightly, Shiro quickly fine-tuned her intent while jumping up on the monster's back, kicking off his shoulders. She flipped through the air. Just as she did this, she sensed several long-ranged attacks coming towards her, using her power of flight. She managed to dodge, but similar to what happened with her sword slashes, she felt danger around her and twirled her spear. Asterisk clang. Blocking a majority of them, Shiro frowned when she felt a few attacks cut across her thighs and forearm, landing on the ground. Shiro slammed her hands down and rock spikes started to stab out of the ground. While this was happening, Shiro continued to fine-tune her intent. After this short exchange, she finally had a semi-decent understanding of the room that she was in. Within this giant room were tens of large pillars that stopped after a certain height, and she still couldn't sense the roof of this place. For the monster, he was similar to a gorgon, with his lower body being that of a snake, but his upper body was definitely not a gorgon. He had two large mantis-like claws and several mouths around his body. In the mouths were rows upon rows of teeth. His head was completely featureless like a mannequin. No hair, no ears, no eyes, no nose or mouth. In addition to this, there was a translucent armor of sorts covering his entire body, making it hard for Shiro to damage him. Slithering around the pillars, the monster twisted his body and slashed towards her with his claw, dashing back. Shiro wrapped her chain around one of the pillars and swung herself around to dodge the claw. Just as she did this, one of the mouths on his body twitched slightly and a new arm exploded out, lashing towards her like a whip. The arm seemed like it had no limit to its reach. Raising her sword, Shiro parried it, but the force sent her tumbling back a little. Clicking her tongue, Shiro activated her restriction of ranged weapons. That way, even if he was to lash out again, his new-grown hands wouldn't be able to harm her, since she had used one charge of her restrictions earlier. This meant that she now only had 2 more charges. Trying to lash out towards her once more, the hand was deflected by a barrier which caused the monster to tilt his head before the arm was sucked back into his mouth. Leaning back slightly, he slithered forwards at shocking speeds. Appearing in front of Shiro, he pulled his claws back and slashed towards her without hesitation, releasing a blast of wind between them. Shiro forcefully made some distance while trying to fine-tune her intent some more. She needed to dial it down so that she could barely sense the surroundings while the monster couldn't sense her. It needed to be her second set of eyes. As she was exchanging moves with the monster, more and more injuries were appearing, but her senses were being fine-tuned with every passing second. At the start, the monster was able to pinpoint her exactly, but now he was becoming a little slower. Naturally, it was the same for her, but she just needed more time to fine-tune her senses. If she had to describe it, it was like adjusting her signal to mask it while she's hacking something so that she could bypass the security. Only, this time the security was much harder and was a giant serpent boss that could cut her in half if he landed a good attack. However, her main goal wasn't to fight head-to-head with the monster, so she didn't have to worry about that. All she needed to do was to delay it as much as she could so that she could finish fine-tuning her intent, buying time with tactics such as using rocks to block his path or using the pillars as a way to escape. Shiro did try to fly as high as she could, but after a certain point past the top of the pillars, she realized that she couldn't fly any higher. But even at this height, she was still within range of the monster, so she had to descend back down and focus on using the monster's body against him. With his large body, she can try to thread between the pillars in an attempt to slow him down, which is much better than staying in the sky. Time passed as minutes turned to hours. Sweat constantly rolled down Shiro's face as she was burning through the large pile of medicine that Beryl had given her. If not for the medicine, she would have been done for long ago with the wounds that she had sustained. After several hours of fine-tuning, Shiro hit a bottleneck, as any further would render her senses useless as well. However, in her current state, she was able to keep the monster at bay while making it hard for him to sense her. Similar to the training with Ketis, she arrived at the boundary once more, but was just short of breaking past this veil. She kept trying to budge past this veil, but it refused to move, denying her from entry. Shiro did try to fine-tune her senses further, but every time it did, it would essentially pause the combat, as neither one could sense the other. Biting her lip, Shiro wondered what she could do. Furrowing her brows, she decided to experiment a little by spreading her energy out like a web before pushing past the bottleneck. But this only served to give the monster an idea of her location while she didn't know where she was. Giving up on that idea, Shiro could only dodge his attacks in frustration. What am I missing? Shiro thought to herself, as there was one thing that she needed to grasp. One key thing that will allow her to bypass this veil. She was thinking of this point. The time slowly extended to a day as the people outside were curious about what was happening inside the tower, since there were still signs of Shiro attempting the trial. For Tenma, he was currently fighting against the monster that could make his attacks phase through his body. Unlike Shiro, he wasn't able to finish all of the monsters quickly, so he had spent quite a bit of time defeating each of them. However, his fighting style was strange. Neither Beryl or Trisha knew what was going on, but he was suspicious to both of the sisters. ####. When you see him raise his arm, counterattack. Even if you are harmed, you forget I can heal you. The voice lectured as there was clear displeasure. If you heal me, they would know that you're helping out. What of it? It's not like they can do anything with you in this barrier. Just be patient, Tenma said as the voice stayed silent and watched this clown act on his own. If not for the fact that he was so easily controlled, he wouldn't have even bothered with this clown. Fighting against this boss for hours, Shiro's movements were beginning to feel sluggish, as even with her ridiculous stamina, and while fighting such a hard boss for hours was still difficult. The worst part about this is that even after thinking about this for hours, she still didn't know how she could achieve the state past the veil. Sighing softly, she dodged the monster's attack one more time. But just as she did this, she felt her leg tense up as her balance was disrupted. **T. Widening her eyes, Shiro immediately felt danger in front of her as the monster sensed that she was still nearby. Quickly shutting off her intent, she disrupted the sense, but the attack was still cleaving towards Shiro's chest. Despite not being able to see the monster with her grid, the feeling of danger was all she needed to see where the attack was coming from. Gritting her teeth, she tried her best to dodge to the side. Time seemed to slow down as she could see that she wouldn't be able to dodge the claw. Summoning her sword, the best she could do was try to push it off to the side or reflect it entirely. She had her senses turned off right now. She didn't know where the monster was, but the feeling of danger was apparent, and she can use that to pinpoint where the attack was coming from. However, as she was in the same state as the monster, she knew that the sense of danger might not be where the real attack was coming, so she focused her mind as hard as she could so that she could find where the true source was. Feeling the claw come closer and closer, Shiro kept her patience while gritting her teeth. The claw pierced her skin. She felt a sudden flash of danger behind her neck. Widening her eyes, she clutched her sword and slashed out. *ping ping. Deflecting the initial attack and blocking the second, Shiro quickly held her waist and jumped back as the first attack had stabbed rather deeply, and the fact that she had forced it to the side caused it to cut across her waist. However, she remembered that flash of danger at the very end of the attack. It was like a torch was suddenly placed in this arena devoid of light and revealed everything to her. The fact that the monster had sent out a second hand from his mouth and aimed it towards the back of her neck. The fact that the monster was hanging off the pillars right now. during that flash. She was able to see everything despite not releasing her intent. That must be the feeling, Shiro thought while quickly backing off, feeling the blood flowing out of her wound. Shiro rummaged through her bag and found that she only had a single bottle of medicine left. After this, she'd be on her own. However, since she now somewhat understood the feeling, she could find a way to break past the veil. Only problem was what were the conditions to trigger the feeling. I'm not a masochist, but I might have to make the monster hit me some more to do this. Shiro mused to herself, as that was the only way she can see herself finding this feeling again. If Nimue was here, she'd probably say that's the feeling of becoming a masochist rather than the barrier. Shiro humored herself while saving her last bottle of medicine for later, messing up her movements some more. Shiro had the monster continuously attack her as she tried to react at the last second. Hashtag, 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 that's a rather odd way to attain the new state, isn't it? Gaia forced a smile as Shiro was essentially slamming her head against the veil in hopes of it breaking and letting her in. Yes, but you have to give her credit for being creative. I have to say, the fact that her first spark of inspiration was actually when she was harmed is rather concerning. If it wasn't for the fact that I know she is sadistic, I would think she's a masochist finding inspiration in pain. Nyx replied with a forced smile. While sometimes people find sparks of inspiration while they're on the verge of death, she is no different. But why does her boundary feel so different? Gaia tilted her head. Because she has no defense. Nyx laughed. When he obtained this state, he was a master of both defense and attack. For Shiro, who has never played an active role as a defensive person, it is going to be difficult to attain this state. Therefore, she made the right choice in choosing to focus on attack when training with Kiedis in the short time that she was given. Who knows? She might become like her mother. After all, some think the best defense is the best defense. Nyx grinned. Speaking of her parents, I feel like they've reached this boundary, but they clearly haven't. Do you think it's the same situation as Shiro? Were they focused on one thing? Not really. I don't know about her father, but her mother is definitely a heavy offensive fighter like her. As for the boundary, neither of them are close. Do you know that in the time Shiro had spent in this world, she has already activated several benefits that she doesn't even know about? The upgrade to her elements, fighting instincts, her monster title, among many other things. How strong do you think she'll be once she exits? Nyx asked with a smile. I'd say she'll be able to put up an even fight with her mother. But if she masters the boundary, even if her mother can see into the future for a few seconds, it'll be useless. Gaia replied. Exactly. Now, what do you think would happen when she fights alongside her party that is almost finished with their trials? Nyx narrowed her eyes. They would be unstoppable when they're together. Bingo. With them receiving this boost before the age of demons and gods, they'll be able to start setting up the anchors along with claiming territories without a single problem. Plus, they'll also have the demon race on their side if they play their cards right with Madison. Plus, they don't know about Isilia yet either, so they? Nyx smirked. Did you plan all of this? Gaia asked. Nope. It was honestly lucky that she ran into Madison and Lyrica. All I did was guide her a little during this trial and give her a little nudge in the right direction. What she did with this guidance is absolutely fantastic since she got every benefit and more. She is really a favored child of the system, isn't she? Nyx laughed. Amen. Her first life, while tragic, gave her great power. Her second gave her protection along with the knowledge of proper magic, and her third made her an empress and a being that could surpass us eventually. Gaia nodded. This is good since there won't be a fourth. With this being the last cycle of our universe. Nyx smiled before turning back to the screen, watching Shiro slowly walk while focusing her mind. Nyx could see the spark growing large and larger with every attack she dodges at this point. Without realizing, Shiro was starting to counterattack without the use of her intent. The monster was only attacking her thanks to his sense of touch, but overall he didn't know her location as the flickers of sword slashes increased. The smile on Nyx's face turned to a grin. She's done it, Gaia muttered after a short pause. Yup, she's attained the offensive part of the boundary. Nyx confirmed. Hashtag, 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 feeling as though the light has returned to her eyes. Shiro could see everything despite not releasing her intent. She could see the grid lines wrapping around the monster's body, shifting with every movement. The tensing of his muscles, the flow of his blood, the twitching of his teeth. Everything was clear, flicking her wrist once. Several sword lights appeared in front of her as they cleaved into the monster's chest. Unlike the previous attempts, these chipped away at his armor. Looking at him through this vision, his weaknesses in the armor were highlighted in a bright red, making it extremely eye-catching. I see. No wonder the other guy couldn't be hit. It's a shame I can only attack, but… She trailed off with a smirk. This should be enough to claim Nyx's tower, reversing the situation in a single second. It was as if a rain of starlight descended onto the monster. Countless sword strikes landed against his body as the weaknesses and the chinks in the armor were obvious to Shiro's sight. As the monster could no longer pinpoint Shiro while she attacked. The only thing he could rely on was his sense of touch. But with the nature of this domain, the sense of touch was not exactly accurate since an attack could come from behind the creature. However, there was a slight downside to this boundary. It was draining her stamina heavily, and with her current state, Shiro couldn't afford to drag this on any longer. When she grasped this, she was already exhausted. If there was light, one would be able to see that her constitution was extremely pale right now. Biting her lips, Shiro continued her attack since she knew she was very close. The moment she breaks through this monster's armor is the moment she killed him, since his movements and weaknesses were shown to her. She could target them with ease and even knock his arms aside despite their physical differences. Feeling as though her lungs were about to burst, Shiro narrowed her eyes and summoned her spear, piercing towards his chest. She watched as the spear tip shattered the translucent armor around the monster and pierced through his chest. However, she didn't let her guard down. Pulling out the spear, she stabbed him a few more times. Pushing the monster back, she didn't allow him a single change to attack back at her. Asterisk bang. Crashing against the wall, the monster laid there lifelessly as Shiro finally saw her system return to her vision. You have completed the Tower of Nyx. Seeing this, Shiro sighed in relief and instantly collapsed on the ground, forcing her eyes open. Shiro could see a dark purple sigil in front of her that was almost identical to the sigil of night that Nyx had given her before. Primordial divinity of Nyx. You have full control over shadows and night. You can create an area of pure darkness around you where your enemies lose all sense of sight and their hearing is dampened. Your shadows are able to dampen the effects of magic. The more energy you use, the more powerful this dampening effect is. It can even nullify magic. You can control the space around you so that people cannot escape through magical means. You can use shadows as a means of attack. They will constantly drain the energy from anything they touch and transfer the energy to you. You can transform your body into a collection of shadows. If anyone tries to land a life-threatening attack against you, you can disperse into a wave of shadows once per day, and they can no longer use the same method to try to kill you. You can use shadow as a means of transport. You can use shadows to form illusions. You can create an area of silence around you where no sound can escape. You have full control over the section of night. And the monsters that inhabit this place, you have a keen sense towards. Magic. Reading the benefits that Nyx's divinity gives her. Shiro raised her eyebrow in surprise since a few of the abilities are reminiscent of what she had before entering this world. Thinking about it for a moment, she shrugged her shoulders since it was better to say that her abilities were similar to Nyx's rather than the other way around. Forcing herself back on her feet, Shiro stumbled for a moment as the arena around her slowly lit up with a soft light. Seeing the destruction around her with almost broken pillars and shattered floors, she looked at the bloodied corpse of the monster which was slowly decaying into ash which drifted off in the wind. Thanks for your help. Shiro smiled since he was the one who helped her grasp this new boundary. Glancing back, she could see a portal of sorts as she walked towards it while using her spear as cane of sorts to help her stand. As Tenma was fighting the final champion to Nyx's tower. The tower suddenly lit up with purple runes which flickered for a moment before dimming down. Just as that happened, the final champion froze in place and dispersed into shadows, with the barrier broken as well. Tenma stood in the center with a confused face. Naturally, the sisters were also confused as to why that happened. However, their confusion soon turned to joy as they saw Shiro appearing in front of the tower with a spear as her support. Seeing her pale face and tired eyes, They knew she must have had quite a fight inside the tower, quickly running over to her. Trisha, Beryl, and Quella supported her. What happened? Beryl asked while quickly giving her some medicine to relieve her fatigue. Nothing much. I finished the trial. Shiro grinned as the three widened their eyes in surprise. In history, only one person had ever completed the tower, and now in front of them, the second person stood. Wait, you have? Quella asked as Shiro nodded her head. Snapping her fingers, the sky above the tower slowly brightened to reveal the light of day before returning to normal. Now can we have some food and rest? I've been fighting for the last couple of hours, and I'm tired as F***CK. Shiro forced a smile as the three nodded their heads, just as they were about to leave. Tenma stood in front of them with a frown on his face. What did you do? I was about to complete my skip. He asked. I finished the trial. Nyx's divinity is mine. Maybe it's a premium divinity that only one person could own at a time. Who knows? Shiro shrugged as Tenma gritted his teeth. Then it should have rightfully been mine. You clown, are you hearing yourself right now? First come first served dip **T. Who was so cowardly that you let me face the dangers first. Now that I have obtained it, you say that it's rightfully yours? Bullsh **T. Shiro rolled her eyes. Ha 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 ha. She's right, you know. But now that tower can't be attempted again. You have no use to me. A creepy voice rang out, but this time everyone could hear it. Hearing this voice, Shiro forced a smile as it was very familiar to her. Ancient terror. Well, I'll be damned. This F***er was a spy all along, huh? Shiro said as she had the sisters stand back. Last time she couldn't do anything against this guy, but this time was going to be different. He's not at full power yet, so if they could kill him, it would be a good opportunity. Indeed. I thought he would be more useful, but no. This clown took much longer to complete the trial. Well, he didn't even complete it in the end, haha. Do you mind if I eat him right now? Not sure if you want this clown to live or not. The ancient terror chuckled as Shiro shrugged. Be my guest. He's dead the moment he colluded with you. Even if you didn't eat him, I would have killed him myself. Shiro grinned as panic appeared on Tenma's face. But before he could say anything, several eyes opened up on his body as teeth exploded out of him, with the sound of bone crunching and blood pouring. They watched as Tenma's body was devoured from the inside out. From his flesh, a shadow grew which slowly transformed into the ancient terror, unlike before. His body was now more fleshed out, as less bones could be seen. However, he was still disgustingly anorexic, which only caused Shiro to shake her head. You seem like you've had quite a diet since the last time I saw you. Shiro smiled. And you seem like you've obtained quite a bit of power. I didn't expect you to have obtained Nyx's divinity, which is a small deviation which I did not expect. The ancient terror replied while the sisters were all frozen in place, and their faces were pale. Though I must say, the fact that you can move freely is a surprise for sure. He narrowed his eyes. It would be quite problematic if I couldn't. Shiro smirked as her notification rang out. Kill the ancient terror now, and you may end the trial. You can also kill him later after you fulfill the quest steps of obtaining all the divinities. Seeing this, Shiro didn't even hesitate to choose the first option, since who knows what would happen if she let him go now.